All right, well, welcome everybody from everywhere except Zurich. I feel like we're the only ones from Zurich. You really do need to rethink our name. Well, this is the 6th time that we're hosting this meetup, so thank you all for joining. This is the 3rd time that we're doing it online. I feel like it works pretty well, but please feel free to give us some suggestions if something doesn't work. Right, well today we're gonna have Alexandra, who's gonna give an input on content research and testing. And she is a UX writer and a content strategist, and she's worked for various corporate communications, so she knows her way around. Afterwards you'll have time for a Q&A session with her, so feel free to write down your questions that you might have for her. During her talk, just as a quick organizational topic, please use the chat. So there'll be some interactive parts. The chat can be used for that. Tamara, Lara, and I will be monitoring it. So if something, technically isn't working, please let us know via chat as well. After the Q&A session, we were thinking of doing like an optional, absolutely completely optional, speed networking event where we send you out into breakout rooms and you can chit chat a little bit for those who kind of missed that social part of of our talks, of our meetups. Then quick second, I have like a list of things I need to say. This is my second to last point. So thank you so much to our sponsor, Nothing. They're based in Zurich and they're our virtual host today, sponsoring host.
They're based in Bern.
They're based in Bern, sorry.
That's cool, but like Switzerland.
We're gonna move you to Zurich.
Yeah. And on that note, we're actually always looking for sponsors and speakers. So if you feel like you have some kind of input on, UX writing or content design, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to hear from you. All right, and with that, I would actually love to hand over to Alexandra, who will tell a little bit about herself, I think.
Sure. Just one more housekeeping thing. Are we recording right now? Just so people know.
We are.
We are. Okay. So just so everyone's aware, it's being recorded. Okay.
And just if anyone sort of notices that they feel uncomfortable with that and that they did say something during the meetup, do feel free to get in touch with me and I'll make sure to edit it out.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. So this could be called content testing and research or content research and testing, either way. It's a bit tricky where to get started first, but that's where we're going to start. So my name's Alexandra. I'm currently based in Zurich. I'm a UX writer and a content strategist. That is for many different mediums. So if you guys want to reach me later, here's my website, okay? Twitter, in case you want to do any live tweeting for this event, and then my LinkedIn. If you want to contact me later, just be sure to mention that you met me at this meetup. All right, so I guess it would be also nice to know anybody else in the crowd that's joined from other parts of the world, but I heard Argentina, Israel, Denver, Bern. So if there's anybody else that wants to give a shout out, please do share in the chat. So today, I'm going to sort of focus in 2 different parts. One, UX writing, and give you some sort of practical exercises to work through. And then the core research and testing part. So that's how to go a little bit more granular into understanding data, using A/B testing as a tool to measure the performance of your content, and then share some best practices. So UX writing. I believe that not everybody on this call might actually be a UX writer. So maybe just to give some sort of very high level definition of what it is. You're not your average copywriter, right? It's working with digital products. So that could be for a phone application. It could be on a website. It could even be sort of button texts that you have in a newsletter or in an email, right? Or an onboarding exercise. And what's most crucial actually for UX writing is that you have empathy. So why empathy matters for your user, and making sure that you understand their intent, right? Where they'd like to focus, And then also understanding where they are in their user journey. So are they willing to make a new purchase? Are they just coming to check something out? Just getting a better understanding of their background and where they come from and what they're looking for in your product. So we're just going to go quickly through a few exercises. Here are 10 writing issues that I've sort of identified and why they're important. So I'm just going to go with the visuals, but here's just an all up. It'll make more sense in just 1 second. So here's the first one, asking for a commitment too early. And this is where I want you actually to write in the chat, okay? So maybe tell me, what do you think is wrong or could be changed with this particular situation? And then Fiona, Lara, or Tamara, if you could just be their voice for them.
Yes. So your answers, please write them in the chat and we will call you out, or we'll, read it out loud. So Kate saying they haven't earned our trust yet and they're already asking for a credit card.
Yeah. So what else? What else could you change to maybe make it a little bit more trustworthy?
Emilia says, why do I need to enter my credit card info? And then Aritzlaf is saying, not making it clear what you are getting by paying. No name entry or anything to warm up the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So exactly, there's some other things. So I guess also in terms of components, which you could change, you could say, instead of just continue, right? Maybe some people, you hit continue and then immediately you've already paid for the product and you didn't know, right? Maybe you also, you're going to the next step, but you're just not sure what continue actually means. So here you could maybe say go to payment or pay now, or submit your billing details or something like that. So just continue is a bit vague. Also, you could have a progress bar maybe at the top indicating beginning the payment, fill in payment details, and then pay now or submit the payment, right? So giving a little bit more clarity on where you are in the buyer's journey in the process. Okay, great.
There's another important point that Natasha just mentioned here, that we don't know how your information is going to be treated once we enter it.
Yeah, so maybe even data protection issues or what they plan to do with this information, right? If they're going to store it somewhere. Okay, so here's the next one, what I call confirm shaming. So what do you see is wrong here? Or what could be adjusted or fixed?
Stop judging.
Yeah.
I like to make bad choices.
Right? So no thanks, I make bad choices. So we already tell the user, if you don't download this PDF, you're maybe a bad person. So health is hard. So I would look at changing the copy to be maybe a bit more peppy or optimistic. Certainly not tell them that if they don't download this PDF that they're making a bad choice. I would think maybe you just say, no, I'm not ready, or something like that instead, right? And then also get the PDF. Maybe there's some other, maybe there's a powerful call to action that you could choose instead. So if there are no other suggestions, should we go to the next one? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. All right, line breaks. This to me one is quite obvious, but maybe just a few in the chat. What do you think is wrong with these personas, let's say, and the copy underneath? Nobody?
No, the dashes, the broken words I'm reading. Yeah,
exactly. So there's a broken line here, and you want to make sure that they fit all in one. I would try and even just put them all under one line, or find a way to get the text to push over onto the second line, so that when you're reading, you're not breaking up neither the word nor the idea, right?
Yeah.
So as they call this guy, in his galaxy far, far away, there's nothing necessarily wrong. It's cute, it's funny, but the way you read it is very tricky for the eyes. Okay.
Yeah, Natasha and Benedict just mentioned the same thing. It's not very accessible to read and it's hard to scan.
Yeah, so always think, that you don't want to make someone squint or have a second look, that it wasn't clear enough from the first glance. Okay, here's another one. I call this aggressive headlines, but what else would you spot here? Or what do you understand from this text? Do you understand anything?
It's hard to scan. There's too much going on.
Very busy. Yeah.
Overwhelming. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone actually understand how much money they're saving?
There's no hierarchy. Don't know where to focus.
Yeah.
Know where to look. What is the focus? I think
so
we got it.
Right, information hierarchy, you don't know where your eyes should glance first because, you know, it's 30%, then it's 20%, then are you getting 20% off, or are you getting $10 off, or, you know, how to make sense of it. I would try and avoid these like aggressive percentage signs and stick to, you know, a clear fact and something that they can argue or reason with when they're going to make a purchase, right? Okay, next one. So jargon. So, you know, in the origins of, let's say, UX writing, there were more technical writers, maybe even some developers that were designing the language. And that's when you used to see, you know, maybe in the 1990s, something like this, right? On occasion, we still come across it. And, you know, when someone writes system code error, you know, authentication issues, does anyone actually understand what that might mean? You know, an average user, what do you think?
Nope.
Yeah, no.
I wrote that one. People would
Here
guess.
it seems a bit more clear, right? Unable to see the sign-in, incorrect name or password. That's a little bit more understandable, right? So depending on what the action is, cancel may or may not also be the right button text, but it depends on the actual use, right? Okay, let's move on to another one. So does anyone believe that this app is #1 just because they say they're #1?
Yes.
They do, okay.
Of course. No,
I would say you'd have to prove it, you know, #1 according to whom? Where is this indicated? You know, if it's, you know, sign up through Facebook, sign up through Google, you need to be a little bit more descriptive. I think it's more likely that if you have some sort of snappy saying or your tagline here that's more identifiable with your brand, you might have better luck. But if you are actually rated #1, then I guess it's worth bragging. But there's always, you know, #1 kebab in town, or #1, you know. So I'd be really careful with promising too much with the product that you designed.
Mm-hmm.
Good
We just got the feedback in the chat as well. Like, we need more social proof, for maybe it is true, but why? Yeah, state the real value proposition.
Or you could even go with a client testimonial. You could have like a speech bubble with the client and saying why they really like this particular, you know, it depends on what sort of landing page this is on, right? Is it on an application, or is it on a web page? Where are you looking at it, and how much information can you put there? Okay, here's another one. Just in general, sort of lack of content. So depending on where you are in the user journey, you need to let them know. As we were talking about earlier with the credit card information, you know, if they weren't told this is the payment section, maybe they're a bit lost, right? Are we being onboarded for a new product, application, subscription, etc.? What's the landing page? So giving a little bit more clearer guidance along the way can really help your user in completing the action and actually becoming a conversion. All right, any questions on that one?
Nope, nothing popping up.
We'll move on. All right, this one, can someone tell me what's special about this one?
Not reading anything yet. Oh, here. Natasha's saying no value for signing up. Two of the same things. Mari. What is the content going to entail? Jobs and special offers of what exactly? There's a redundancy in it, and it can fit any brand on earth, is what I'm reading. Yeah,
I mean, those are all great. I would say mostly it's just boring. So there's no branding in here. There's no, you know, sure, subscribe to what. If you're on the web page, maybe you understand what they're selling or what they're giving you, you know, what their value proposition is and why you would want to receive more information. But the newsletter itself isn't selling it, right? So maybe you can fit in some good style and tone into this phrasing, right? And instead of just saying subscribe, you can say something a bit more exciting. Sign me up, or I'm ready to. You can play with the button text also a little.
Also, I'm reading 2 times here. What's the deal with the checkbox down there? Like, why do you have to check the box in addition? Kind of.
Yeah, good point. Maybe there's, yeah, I don't know. It could be, you know, maybe there's different types of updates that they could receive. So it's a valid point there too, that it's maybe a bit redundant. Okay, next one. So for the talking head fans out there, stop making sense. For me, I'd like to know what you find different about this banner ad.
I don't understand it at all.
I'm glad to see that other people don't get it too.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
What's
I
the
think
product?
that's the main point, is that there's no sense behind it. So what are they selling? What is it about? You can see here, maybe it's related to security issues, or that they, you know, or is it, you know, what their product is? You're not sure. Also, what does Brad and Angelina have to do with their product? We don't know either. So I would be a bit careful about trying to sound too fun, but not really actually providing, you know, or saying what your value is, right? Another thing here, you know, maybe sign up, sign in is too similar. You know, try to make it also a little bit more varied in terms of the copy that you use, and so that it's very direct what you would want to do, right?
We actually have a few comments on this one. So I'm reading, you're expecting your user to know what you mean. It's pretty unclear that what is being offered. You're breaking up with them. It's unclear like what is meant. It's also maybe just a bit insensitive, you know. And the picture, I like this comment actually, like the picture strikes a weird tone because it seems to evoke the idea of separation, but also seems weirdly happy.
Yeah, she looks quite happy about it, whatever it is.
Yeah. So,
it also looks a bit like stock footage. So you could maybe, you know, but always think about pairing your copy with your images, right? Make sure that they're compatible. So if you have something of a very somber tone, don't have an image of someone who's like blissfully happy, right?
I wonder if they did an ad test on this one, Laura asks.
We hope. Okay, now vague errors. What do you think here? What's something here that you would maybe do instead, let's say? So this is just different examples, like, oops, something wasn't right. Would you know afterwards what that actually means? Like, let's say you put in a password.
So
you
it's
put
not really
any of that makes sense to you?
These messages are no help for the user, and there's a lot of red in there.
Yeah.
They don't really help solve the problem. Red is no use unless it's a warn. No, red is no unless warn. Oh, don't use red unless it's a warning.
Yeah.
And help the user take corrective action. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, help the user take corrective action. Maybe even give them some idea. Let's say you have a password and the password requires, you know, 3 numbers, you know, some sort of symbol and a capital letter. Then they might need to know that, right? So to just give them a little bit more feedback, like what could actually be wrong, or, you know, if it was your, you know, a username and your password, maybe they need to know that it was just your password or just your username that's the issue, right? Not just saying this doesn't work. Try and help them and guide them along the way. Okay. So that's the end of our little exercise. And now I want to dive a bit deeper into understanding data, why it's important, what kind of data can you come across, what to do with it. So you could say or separate them into sort of qualitative data and quantitative, right? So qualitative would be rather how your users think, feel about a particular moment, you know, in a process. Let's say it's an onboarding, or, you know, if they're processing a payment, whatever it might be. And you can figure out this kind of information by having stakeholder interviews, right, with externals or even internals within your company. It depends what your testing is like. You can actually ask your customers. You can do a trial period, or have a testing group. So you can actually have this sort of verbal feedback, or, you know, something filled out on a form. You can kind of read what kind of help or guidance they can give you in terms of the design. Quantitative, on the other hand, is something that you can actually measure your performance, and where you can see whether there's something was successful based on maybe a benchmark that you have. And I'm going to dive now a little bit deeper into the quantitative part and A/B testing. So that's just one tool that you can use. There are many others, and we'll go through those too, if you have any questions at the end of the presentation. So who tests content, and why, you know, why I say who, you know, this might be a UX writers meetup, but many of you might have actually a hybrid role. You're not only a core UX writer. Maybe you are also the digital marketeer for your team or your company. Maybe you are, you know, by trade, a copywriter. You know, you want to dive deeper into the digital sphere. Maybe you're more into content strategy, organizing where things go on what mediums, or maybe you're a designer. So there's a lot of different people that might use A/B testing or need to test content. It really depends on their type of role and who they would coordinate with. So the different type of people that they could work with in the testing period would be their own customers, other marketers on your team, or externals, working with maybe the developers in a project, or the designers putting it all together. And then what kind of content or how would they test for? So very loose terms, I would say you could use marketing metrics, right, and measure the amount of conversions that you have in terms of the success rate, or you could use sort of a product metric and look at the engagement, right? And engagement can be many different levels. It depends on what you're measuring. Okay, so now to sort of dive a bit deeper, where do we start? Generally, you know, you're observing whatever it is you have, whether you have a product, an app, maybe, you know, software, something like that. And then you have a question like, okay, why is this performing not necessarily as well or as optimal, or maybe it could perform better? And then you want to sort of develop a hypothesis, right? This you can change, right, by maybe testing some things and then gathering some other data and then deciding, okay, maybe this would work better. But in the end, you want to test it, and then you have some idea of what the theory actually is. So loosely, right? So developing a hypothesis, what can you do? You can do some ethnographic research. So look into the people. You can have focus groups and hold sessions with either internally in your company, or externally. You can ask people to test out a new product before it's released, or it's sort of in a beta phase. Maybe it's partially released and then you're going to adapt and be a little bit more agile with the product. You can also do some usability testing. You can do surveys, right? That could be surveys that you do just strictly online, so you don't have to leave the office to do it. And then you can just look at general trends and data. So data of your own data set or data externally that you've looked at, right? And then running the experiment, so the true A/B test. So diving a bit deeper, what is an A/B test, or how did it come from? You know, where did it come from? So it's actually not anything really new. It's been around for hundreds of years. Maybe just you haven't, you know, identified it as such. It's a scientific term, right? So originally, I guess you can trace it back to even when sailors were getting scurvy and they were wondering how were they getting them, why were they getting scurvy? And that they realized it was a vitamin C deficiency on the boats. So they decided to do 2 different experiments, and then they realized, okay, if they do supplements of orange juice, or, you know, bring in something where they can have it, that was the real cause. So that's like dating way back. But if you look at it in sort of the digital marketing space or advertising, right, in the 1960s, you can also do an ad and see which one works better. It's just not in the digital realm as such yet. By the 1990s, you see this moving into digital marketing. And then sort of the first test would be, you know, with Google would be in the 2000s. Now they're testing, A/B testing everything. But And just to give you a little bit of a background, that this isn't a new field, a new tool. It's just developed depending on the platform that you're using. Okay, so what does an A/B test look like? Generally, it's known as a split test, right? So you choose one variable. Let's say we want to have this photo, right? And we decided we'll put it on the right side. When we decide 50% are going to put it on the right side, and then 50% we're actually going to put on the left side. So comparing two versions to see which one actually performs better, we can see that actually version B performs better, that 40% of a conversion rate is higher, right, than the right-hand side, which is 20%. So that's just a general all up, but different platforms that use A/B testing, you can, I mean, Optimizely, I think is quite common, the most. I don't know, ladies, speak up if you use any other ones that are not listed here, but these are the ones that I know of. So Optimizely, Kissmetrics, VWO, Unbounce, it depends, but I think Optimizely also has some good research and resources on its webpage, so if you're curious to learn more. So there's also something called a multivariate test, and that might be that you're not just doing a split test, right, where you have an A and a B version, and you say, oh, okay, there's only one version that works better according to this test. It could be that you work with maybe two variables and you want to see the right combination. So you can see here that this version maybe works the best. Okay, and so again, like this meetup is generally geared towards UX writing, but maybe some of you have other tasks or goals that you want to work on at work. So there's other things that you can work with an A/B test: email campaigns, individual emails, you know, just general media strategies, marketing strategies, and advertising, you know, web design, etc. So you can be really creative, even if you're a small team. And then the type of variables that you can work with. So on the left-hand side, we have maybe, you know, something a bit more for designers, right? You have maybe the color scheme, or, you know, depending the layout, the types of images, maybe this is, you know, how you display it. This is rather for writers, headings and subheadings, oops. Product pricing for marketeers, special offers. And then your call to action button design, copy length, size, placement, structure, style and tone, onboarding, loading time, all of that is for writers. So you can experiment with all these different things. So I'm going to give you a few other examples just to make sure that you guys are still here with me. So when to test. So I would say you would test when you have a specific metric, when you have a new design maybe you want to try out, or you know a design could actually be more beneficial. Let's say you went through a rebrand and your tone of voice changed. And then also, I guess campaigning is also a nice time because you have a lot of content that's streaming through and you want to see which one works better. But in general, you want to see what works best. So I'm going to tap on the crowd again and see if you guys are still awake. What do you see here that's different from version A and version B?
The button, the CTA copy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the only thing that has changed. And that's why I'm saying that, you know, you will usually want to stick with maybe one variable. So any guesses without doing any user research, which one would perform better? Or if it were you and you wanted to sign up for a yoga retreat, which one would you be interested in?
I'm getting these buttons actually describe two different actions, but the left one, we're getting both, book now and see details.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty good or common answer, is that it really again depends on your user and their user journey and where they are. You know, is it that maybe most of the users might actually be in a sort of a shopping phase and they just want to know more, so maybe they would click on see details, right? They would want to know, where is this yoga retreat, you know, in Cornwall? What kind of facilities do they have? How many days is it? You know, can I bring my friends? This sort of thing. But maybe if you're like very solid and you know, maybe you're on a list, you know, you see a list of different retreats and you know you want to go specifically to this one, then maybe book now might be actually in the commitment stage that you're ready for. Okay.
Scott, just had another answer here. He says, what does the button actually do?
Mm-hmm.
And we also question whether it's okay to have both buttons.
Yeah, it could be. I would say also it depends on the layout, right? If you have them next to each other versus one on top of the other. But again, it probably depends on your user, right? What personas, what persona research have you done? Who's looking at your website, right? Okay, let's go to the next. So here's a case study for microcopy from Google, and it's a similar case, right? In terms of maybe when they're ready. Here you can see that book now or book a room wasn't nearly as popular as just saying check availability, right? So you have a 17% engagement rate from this case study of them, rather than just taking that room. So again, it showed that, they weren't ready for the commitment yet. Maybe they just wanted to know the days in mind, or also what the prices are for those days. It really depended. So does anybody else have any other observations or even know this case study from beforehand? No?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, we'll keep going then. All right, so again, what versus why. So sometimes you might know that something changed, but you might not have the answer of why it changed through an A/B test. So that's where I want to explore now, sort of, the assets or the advantages of an A/B test versus, where you can kind of be left in the dark and where you might want to dip into more research. So what can a test tell you? Yeah, it can tell you how many people performed an action, but to an alternative, but it might not be able to tell you why they decided to go for that action versus the alternative, right? So that's where you might have some focus groups or some surveys that might give you some better insights. Again, a component, like let's say you change just the button text. You might know that along the way they stopped performing an action, but you might not always know why, like how they're feeling about it. So again, that's where the qualitative research really matters. And then again, certain metrics in general that could impact, the design, right? You might have some insight on that, but you might not always have the why. Does anybody have any examples they'd like to share?
I'm just reading that from Panak, that usability testing is probably better for the why part.
Yeah.
And Benedict is asking, are you mainly referring to unmoderated tests?
It depends. I think it depends. Yeah. Okay. Should we keep going to what can't a test tell you? So again, why a certain design works, how a particular copy might make them feel, right? So giving into, if they feel that they're committing too early, or if they feel that it's too much information, or maybe they feel lost in the process. When is this over? How many more buttons do I have to click before this is done? And then also how engaged a user is. Maybe, even if there's very high engagement, you're not necessarily going to know, how much or what really interests them. So you might want to do some more qualitative research there too. Okay, so what makes a good test? Again, going back to forming a hypothesis, generally you can follow this. If you change, if you do X, then Y will happen, and then, it's because of Z. So if you think about identifying an issue, let's say we have the fact that someone's doing a yoga retreat and they say see details, but actually you're not getting enough people to click on it. Maybe the issue is that they're actually ready to shop, right? And they want to book that yoga retreat now. So you have to find out what the possible cause would be. And maybe you form a hypothesis and say, okay, well, maybe if I give more information on the page in general, or if I change, the call to action, then it might actually get more signups. So try and think, step by step, how things are affected, and then also make sure that you make an educated assumption before you test. So to keep in mind before you test, that if you make a huge change, right, that you could also have, you know, or if you make a small change, that you could have a very, very big difference in the end. So if it's just a very, very, very small change in copy, if you have a very small sample size, that might not be actually enough to know whether it's worth testing again. So just to make sure that your sample size is as big as possible, and that it makes, you know, statistically that it's significant, that there's a difference that you can measure. Keep your audience in mind, so make sure they're also fairly represented. Don't always test on just the most homogeneous group of people if you know that that your real audience out there is very diverse. Make an educated hypothesis, so don't assume anything. Don't go with just your gut and say, oh well, I would do this, or I think that would be the best way forward, or I know 3 years ago the users you know, prefer this option. No, do some research first and then think about how you're going to test. Again, don't, as a minor change can make a big change later on in terms of the results, don't try and do too many things at once. So stick to 1-2 variables, you know, depending, and then, you know, you can run several tests later to see if those things are better, but at once, just try to keep it small. And then I want to say, you know, that a lot of people out there might be only in a team of one, like they're the only digital marketeer, you know, if they work in a startup or in a small company, or they're the only UX writer in a team. I would say, you know, try and network and team up with other colleagues in your office. So let's say, you know, you are the only UX writer, but there's a digital marketing team. So think that they're also doing A/B tests, and that you can share, you know, knowledge and best practices and what works. And maybe they've already done some research in terms of the users or the audience or your customers or clients. So just don't think that you're the only one out there. Try and find other people that can help you. So what to expect during a test. Let the test run. Don't stop a test early just because you think you got the right result. Let it run all the way through. Run tests, you know, more than once, because especially if you think you got a funny answer. Sometimes, you know, numbers, if they look funny, there could be something behind it. So it's okay to do a test, you know, more than once. And again, don't keep testing something if you get the same result and you don't like it. It could be that it just didn't work. So don't be afraid to try something new. And then remember that, you know, that on the job, that this testing, you know, also takes you away from doing other parts of your job, right? So think, you know, test when there's a reason for it, or if you know that you can provide some value, but don't test just for the sake of testing. And then A/B testing, yeah, it's not the only way to measure. So I want to go through a couple other things with you, what else you can do that can provide some insights. So what else is out there? So there's something called closed testing, right? So here's an example below of a closed test, when you sort of do a Mad Libs and you fill in the blanks to see if someone can keep track of what it actually might be. So here's Facebook's privacy policy. Storyboarding, so using your user and thinking about along the way in the process, kind of actually drawing up a storyboard. You can do this, I think it's called storyboarding.com, honestly, the platform that you can use. And, you know, being able to sort of draw out exactly where they are in the process. And then you can also just do a journey map instead. So that's another option. Also, what else is out there? Just in general, sort of word trends. You might think that, you know, geographically speaking, that everyone in one country, you know, speaks the same language. It's not necessarily the case. I'll give an example. Growing up, everyone called it, you know, a soft drink, a pop. Then I met a girl from Texas. She told me that she drinks Coke. Everything is a Coke. And then I had a roommate from California, and she told me that she drank soda. We're all talking about the same thing. So just make sure you do your research and know who you're talking to and what kind of keywords you should be using. So here I have an example from Google Trends. It's a a tool that you can use to just determine which one would work better. Here I just gave an example, like we're constantly talking about COVID right now, but sometimes you hear the coronavirus, right? So I did a search for the US in the past 12 months, and you can see here that coronavirus on average is a more popular term than COVID, right? So surveys, again, we explored that before. That's something that you can use. Usability research. And then I guess if you're heavier on the digital marketing side, then you can look at a net promoter score. So, or a customer satisfaction score. So how your customers actually rate the process afterwards. So let's keep going because we actually reached the end. So I just wanted to say, you know, this is generally true. Writing can be easy. You just have to cross all the, you know, the wrong words out. Just, you know, with a little bit of research and knowing what's the best way forward, you can find the right tools, the right text, the right copy, you know, maybe even the right design to better suit your users. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Again, my contact details are there, and we can open up for questions.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. That was very insightful. I loved it. Yeah, we're getting a lot of thank yous here.
Okay, great. If you guys have questions also in general about UX writing or how to get started, that sort of thing, I'm happy to answer. You know, it doesn't have to be specific to A/B testing or content testing or research. Happy to answer.
We actually have some questions that popped up throughout the talk.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was, how would you handle a project when there's no time for A/B testing?
Well, I would say if you've done prior research, then you can also, you know, make some guesses there on what's best. I can say that it depends on, like, a campaign might be a good example that you have to churn out a lot of content very fast. And I would also look at how well things have performed in the past. And then, you know, make sure that you do intervals in testing different type of things, not just think about, you know, on your day-to-day when things are slow, where can you experiment, and not just think about on the very, very busy periods of your job when you should be doing all of that kind of groundwork. If it's a very large product launch, then I would say you should definitely A/B test.
If the person who asked that question originally has any follow-up questions, just let us know.
Yeah.
The next one is, do you always go exactly 50-50 when A/B testing with the groups?
Well, if it's a split test, I mean, you could do some variety. It depends. Also with a multivariate test, that's another way of testing different versions. But I think, you know, it largely depends on your sample size. So, you know, if you have let's say you have a newsletter and you're going to change the email, the subject line of the email, you know, and you're going to say, usually it just says like newsletter edition 1, you know, with the date or something like that. And then you have another one that says like current trends happening, you know, now, you know, check out our new newsletter. So, you know, something that's a bit more snazzy, that you're going to automatically maybe see a poll. And then if you already play with the numbers first in terms of how much someone receives, I would find it a bit trickier. So I would say, you know, run a few tests. Don't just run one, right? Analyze, you know, first 50-50, then you can look at, you know, partitioning the count as well.
Okay. And the next question actually has to do with this too, because someone asked, so it usually requires a big sample of users, and what do you do when you don't have that?
Well, I would say that you should set up your, okay, it depends on the type of work that you do, right? So if you are working with a website or you're doing social media, I mean, there's a lot of free tools out there, right? There's Google Analytics. So I would say that maybe your company isn't measuring things yet, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. So the first thing you should do is think about, how can I harness that data, right? Not everyone is working and basing all their decisions just on numbers. So try and get your company into the mindset of finding more information out first. but you should have, and then if it's a more controlled testing environment, that's something where you can actually really better understand, right? You have a designated group that's in a beta phase that's testing something out.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, just going through the questions here. Then we had a question, whether you could talk about your thoughts on talking clients into investing in research and testing. How do you do that?
When they see a reward in it, I guess it would be a little bit more helpful to know what kind of clients, like for what kind of product.
Maybe the person who asked that question could drop that in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that made more sense to you ladies as well.
We do have one more more general question, which was how many days do you usually run A/B tests? Is there like an average?
Again, it depends on the product. So, I mean, I can tell you, for example, like with a social media campaign, and if it's long running, that you might want to test it for a week span, because maybe someone is looking at that particular post for a whole week. You'll still get clicks, likes, engagement. So I would also have try to get a general sense of how long you get engagement over something, and if there's internal deadlines that you have in terms of turnover, and when you need to deliver that information.
Fiona or Lara, are you keeping an eye on the time? We do have quite a few new questions coming in now.
I think we can keep going for another, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. I mean,
cool.
Yeah.
So we have one here that says, do you have any tips for user testing copy remotely?
You mean working remotely?
The testing users remotely.
Well, I've seen some companies, Booking.com has done this. I've participated just for fun, where they actually have like a call for volunteers. So they have you actually first submit just an interest in participating in a particular survey or a testing phase, and then they have a little bit more of a controlled environment where they try to better understand their users. That I think actually worked quite well. I think it depends on again who you're trying to reach. So this was put out by someone who actually works there, and then they contacted people in their own professional network, but maybe that's not your actual user. So I think it depends on, again, who you're trying, whose information you want to know and who you're trying to tap. So, but generally, like a call for volunteers can help.
Right. Okay. Then we have a question: who do you involve when you're conducting A/B tests, and do you need a programmer?
I think, again, it depends on your product. I mean, if you have a team, let's say, if you're working for, let's say, the four, right, that there's a huge community of UX writers, and you can tap on a lot of insights from your peers. Now, a lot of other companies, it's more of a hybrid role, and you do some UX writing, maybe you do some regular copywriting, or you do some digital marketing, or you do, it really depends. But there you might have to actually work with a smaller team, or maybe even do a lot of things yourself, right? So I think it really depends on the makeup of your team, but I would try to get, also very early on in the process to get everybody on board, so that communication is streamlined and you have all the stakeholders in mind and that nobody was left out. But definitely think about, if you have a large enough team, about developers, about designers, maybe even your marketing team, they might have some customer insights to share.
Okay. I'm sorry, my chat just did something really weird.
I can
could you jump in?
take over? Yeah, of course. So Chris is asking, I'm just gonna read this. Or Chris, actually, do you want to just ask the question yourself, because it's a longer question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Alexandra. Yeah, so I have a client with a blog who, yeah, they have a blog. They don't have personas or job stories. and they want to get started with testing the relevance of that content. And so I'm just wondering if you'd recommend starting with like qualitative interviewing of users to improve their understanding of the audience and what they're trying to like accomplish in coming to the site, or whether it's best to look at performance data and like bigger picture SEO data to kind of
Right.
see patterns.
Both are going to help. But I would think that there's definitely some groundwork it sounds like you need to do first before you dig into the numbers, right? Because, you know, you can always look at a number and say, okay, they prefer this option versus this option, but you might, if you don't know who your audience is, I don't know how rewarding that is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm a firm believer of having some really developed persona exercises. Not everybody wants to pay for it or doesn't see the value added, but you know, maybe that you can kind of give them some other examples of different, you know, you can run like a survey, for example, if they have a blog, you can put that in one of the blog pieces, right? Saying complete the survey if you're interested, you know, find some sneaky ways to put it in there that might interest people, but then think also, you know, what's, you know, how many people would actually reply to something like that, right? Because a survey might only have like, you know, by industry standard have like 10% of answers. So if you have a, you know, if it's a sample size that's again statistically significant enough, you can try that. But again, your client, I mean, maybe it's also better to get to know your client better and to know what are their, you know, what are their user needs, what are their desires, where do they want to see more engagement, or where, you know, not just talking about conversions in terms of signups or you know, finding a new client, but what do they want to what do they want people to better understand about their product?
Yeah, that's a great tip, looking at them as users first. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think the next question is coming from Austin. Austin, do you want to ask your question yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so my question is if anyone would have any recommendations for ways to segue more into UX writing from a background of maybe doing more non-interactive marketing content. Writing and design in that field is more what I've done. So would it be good to do more like a personal project, or try to steer a project in one's existing work towards that? Or I would just be curious for any recommendations anyone would offer.
Sure. I can point you to a blog piece that I wrote, actually, how to get started after this. But I think, you know, firstly, I mean, I don't know enough about your background to say too much, but, you know, sometimes people are doing UX writing without realizing it. And there might be some projects that you've done that, you know, you didn't know that you were actually designing something. You're not just being, you know, your regular copywriter. So I would look at examples in the past that you've already done. Then I would look at the flexibility from your current job, right? So how many, you know, how many new projects could you take on that might be a little bit different? How flexible is your boss to letting you try something new? And then if that's not an option, I would say, and I'm not a big fan of working for free, but I would say look at how you can, you know, look for a pro bono gig or something where you volunteer, and maybe something that you're very passionate about, right? So let's say, you know, you're really passionate about getting girls working in tech, let's say, you know, women in STEM. So you volunteer for another project that might be, you know, setting up somebody's website, writing the web copy there, and looking at the button text, and looking at, you know, there's a lot of ways you can get your teeth in there. And then also, again, these meetups are a good place, you know, broadening your network, learning about new opportunities, you know, finding like-minded people that like to work on projects. And then I would say also, maybe, I don't know if you've ever tried looking at certificates, right? So online certificates, or going, you know, doing some continuing education so that you can kind of get that on your CV already as a recognized seal of approval. Ladies, I don't know if you have any other insights in there to share from your own stories, but I think that's kind of where you can do some legwork.
Yeah, totally agree. I would have also said, like, if it's a bigger company, especially where you work now, you can usually like offer to help out the team that does this. There may be a UX writer, there may not be a dedicated UX writer, but if you've already written anything, especially if it's online, yeah, you've probably already done UX writing without knowing it. And they're probably more than willing to let you help out on a project internally.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right, well,
agree. As someone who just like, I don't know, got into UX writing, I don't know how. I feel like there's a lot out there, and like in terms of what you can read, like the blog posts, also you already mentioned this, Alexandra, but like the networking events, I feel like you get to know a lot of people in the UX writing sector pretty quickly. And then I feel like that could be a good like jumpstart for getting into UX writing. And you already mentioned it as well, but like certificates, there's actually an online course that I did for this. It really helped just to, you know, gain a big picture of UX writing and kind of use the right terminology already. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Alexandra. You mentioned the most important things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to share my blog with you in the chat afterwards. Huh?
thank
And
you.
maybe
Yeah.
just in general also just, I mean, I guess if you're already coming from writing, you probably have that down. So maybe just focus more on like UX as such, kind of trying if maybe you're interested to just go deeper there.
Yeah.
And then just bringing the writing skills that you already have to that.
And you know, some people, they start out wanting to do UX writing, and I know we have a lot of different countries on the call, so maybe that's why I'll mention it. But you know, there's a lot of other fields that you can go into where you still work with UX, but maybe you're not the UX writer. One example is like a localization expert. So if you're not a native English speaker, you know, a lot of copy is written in English for some apps, but a lot of times they want to look for someone who has some insights on a local culture and can share, you know, or translate that information quite easily. So, you know, you look at UX field and it looks, you know, rather large, but when you zero in, there might be some other places that you might be interested in exploring as well.
All right, well, thank you everyone who responded. I'll be happy to pursue any available leads. So
Great.
I appreciate that.
All right, so we have 1, 2, 3 more questions.
Okay.
What do y'all think? Yeah? All right, let's do them. So Joseph, any tips for how to convince an internal analytics team to devote resources to testing the words and designs?
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it depends how far they're stretched and how big the team is and if they specialize. So if you have like, let's say you're a very lean team and you only have one data guy who's collecting analytics for everything, that they're probably not very, they're probably going to be reluctant to give you some of their time. But if you are, you know, you have a large team and then maybe you have some people that are more specialized in different things and are also interested in, you know, I would talk to them and see also what they're interested in exploring, what they'd like to do, what they'd like to learn more about, and maybe you could probably get more of their time. Sometimes it's about relationships. Otherwise, I would also see like where they might be able to contribute to just one particular project and see how it goes, to sort of do a trial. Ladies, do you have any other suggestions?
Case studies, yeah, show them where like content testing worked and how it might work for the specific case. I think you summed it up pretty well, Alexandra.
Okay, good.
So we have Kate, who's referring to the question that she asked before. Kate, do you want to ask your question yourself? Are you still here? All right, so let me just find her first question. She was asking how to convince her customers or her clients to do testing. And now she's saying my clients are usually professional services clients, and they're convinced they know their customers, so they don't need to do the research. I think we all know that problem.
So they're convinced they already know the answer,
Yeah.
and that's why they don't want to do the testing. Well, then you need to show them the numbers. I mean, and maybe also demonstrate you need to prove your value. So what could you do? What could you change? I mean, sometimes it's also good to show from the past, you know, your previous experiences. So if you've already done some content testing in a different role, you can explain how, oh, this was really a rewarding experience because, you know, we were able to maximize, you know, engagement by, you know, 25%, or we were able to drive this many conversions, or we had this many client leads, you know. so I'm afraid, yeah, you have to show maybe more the quant side, because it sounds like they might not want to listen to just, how you feel about it or what you think. You need to prove it. But I don't know, ladies, do you have any other options to explore?
I was gonna say what you said before, the example with the book now, you could show them cases from other companies too, where such a little change actually did so much.
I agree. Case studies. Okay, so we have one last question from Kumari. Do you think customer journeys mapped by UX, does this differ from the content perspective? And if yes, how does it differ?
Ooh, you mean a UX, I guess it'd be nice to know a little bit more. By UX, you mean a UX designer, or you mean a UX writer? Because I would say that they're going to have probably very different things in mind. A designer might be really based, might look at some aesthetics, right? Well, the copywriter, the writer might be looking at tone of voice, might be looking at, particular words that might be more powerful, might be looking.
Just got an answer. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
UX designer. So.
Yeah, you're gonna have a different perspective. So, you can storyboard together. If you're just looking at doing the copy first, on your own, if you're just sketching out the whole process, it might look a bit different if you see them visually. Sometimes, again, it depends how your company works. I would say always onboard the writer first to these kind of projects, but it could be that they've already developed something and they already have the visuals kind of set up, and that they want you to fill in the text. But I would try and influence a little bit the design at the same time, just to make sure that they're paired well together.
Cool.
Right, that was everything, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Alexandra. That was the last question from the chat. I feel like we covered a lot. So thanks so much for taking the time. So our idea now for the rest of for the ones who want to stay was, we were thinking of doing a small speed networking event where we would put you into breakout rooms and you could talk for 5 minutes. We also have 2 introductory questions in case you don't know what to talk about. If you do not want to stay, feel free to leave our Zoom meeting. But if you do want to stay for the speed networking, feel free to stay in.
And we won't be recording the speed networking.
Oh, no.
Yes, obviously.
Grading answers.
So we'll leave a few minutes for those to leave the call if they would not like to join.
There's
Thank you all for joining.
Thanking you in the chat, Alexandra.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone. And if you'd like to connect with me, feel free to add me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter.